A ring can save your life, but in Nathan Cross's world, it could also sign away everything you thought belonged to you. I learned that on a Thursday night at the Whitmore Grand, while carrying 12 glasses of champagne across a ballroom that smelled like money, rain, and expensive lies. The storm outside pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city into a blur of yellow taxis and black umbrellas. Inside, everything glittered. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, men in tailored suits speaking softly enough to make their words feel heavier. I was 25 years old, wearing a black server's uniform that never fit right, with $12 in my checking account and a rent notice folded inside my purse like a threat. I was not supposed to matter in that room. People like me moved through rooms like that quietly. We refilled glasses. We smiled when men forgot our names. We disappeared before anyone important had to remember we existed. That was the rule. And I was good at rules until I heard my own last name spoken from behind a half-closed terrace door.
Carter.
One word.
Soft.
Careless. Sharp enough to stop my breathing. My fingers tightened around the silver tray. I should have kept walking. I should have pretended I heard nothing. But fear does strange things to ordinary girls. It makes you still. It makes you listen. Two men stood near the terrace, their voices low beneath the sound of rain tapping the glass. I caught pieces, not enough to understand everything, but enough to understand danger. A delivery at the river. A witness who needed to be handled. A woman from the hotel staff who had seen too much. Then one of them said my first name. Emily. The tray slipped before I could stop it. Crystal hit marble with a sound like the whole room cracking open. Conversations died one by one. Heads turned. 100 strangers looked at me as I dropped to my knees, whispering apologies while broken glass glittered around my hands. I felt the sting of a small cut on my palm, but I did not move. I could feel those men watching from the terrace. I could feel their silence. And then I felt something worse. Someone else was watching me too. I looked up, and across the ballroom stood Nathan Cross. I knew his name because everyone in the hotel knew his name, even if they never said it above a whisper. He was 34, tall, still, and dressed in black like the room had been built around him. His hair was dark blonde, brushed back with ruthless precision. His skin was pale beneath the chandelier light, his face calm in a way that made panic feel childish. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had already measured the room, counted every exit, and decided who would be allowed to leave. His eyes found the blood on my palm. Then they lifted to my face.
No pity. No smile.
Just recognition. Like he knew the exact second my life had become his problem. The two men from the terrace started moving toward me. Slowly. Too slowly. My legs wanted to run, but the ballroom felt endless, and every door suddenly seemed farther away than it had a minute ago. Nathan moved first. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He crossed the marble floor with the quiet authority of someone the world stepped aside for, and it did. Guests shifted without knowing why. Security straightened. The men from the terrace stopped. Nathan reached me before anyone else could. He looked down at the broken glass, then at my shaking hands. His voice was low enough that only I could hear it. Emily Carter, he said, and my stomach dropped because I had never told him my name. You need protection. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. He took a clean white handkerchief from his jacket and wrapped it around my palm with a gentleness that felt more frightening than force. Then his gaze flicked toward the terrace. Whatever he saw there made the air change. He leaned closer, not touching me except for my injured hand, and said, "Do exactly what I tell you, and you walk out alive tonight." My heart beat, so hard I could hear it beneath the music starting up again, soft and false, like the room wanted to pretend nothing had happened. I whispered, "I just want to go home." For the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Not softness. Not warmth. Something older. Regret, maybe. "Home," he said, "is the first place they'll look." Then he reached for the ring on his right hand, a heavy silver ring with a black stone set deep in the center. Every man near him went still. I noticed that. I noticed the way their expressions changed before I understood why. Nathan slid the ring free, took my left hand, and pressed it onto my finger. It was too large.
Cold. Heavy.
Final. Wear it, he said. I stared at him, confused, terrified, and bleeding through his handkerchief. What is this? His eyes held mine. The only reason they'll think twice before touching you. The ring felt heavier than it should have, as if Nathan Cross had not placed silver on my finger, but an entire world I had never asked to enter. I looked down at it, dark stone catching the chandelier light, and for one foolish second I thought protection would feel like relief. It did not. It felt like every dangerous person in that ballroom had suddenly learned my name. Nathan kept his hand around mine just long enough to make sure the ring stayed in place, then released me with deliberate care. The white handkerchief around my palm had already turned pink at the center, but his eyes did not stay on the cut. They moved past my shoulder toward the two men from the terrace. I turned slightly. They were still there, standing 20 feet away near the marble column, pretending not to watch while watching everything. One of them lifted his phone. Nathan did not look angry. That was what scared me. Anger was human. Anger had edges. What settled over his face was colder than that, a kind of stillness that made the music, the rain, and the polite laughter around us seem thin and fake. A man in a black suit appeared beside him, broad-shouldered, pale, with an earpiece tucked against his collar. Nathan said one word, "Car." The man nodded and disappeared into the crowd. I finally found my voice. "I cannot leave with you." Nathan looked at me then, and the full weight of his attention made my knees feel unsteady. "You can leave with me," he said quietly, "or you can leave with them." I followed his gaze. The men near the terrace had separated now, one moving toward the service hallway, the other toward the main exit, cutting off paths I had used 100 times during shifts without thinking. My mouth went dry. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him this was America, that people could not just decide where a woman went, that I had rights and a phone and a life waiting outside these gold walls. But my phone was in my locker. My manager was nowhere in sight. And the last thing I had heard before dropping that tray was my own name spoken like a problem someone intended to solve. Nathan stepped beside me instead of in front of me, not blocking me, not touching my back, simply standing close enough that the world understood I was under his shadow. "Walk," he said.
So I did.
Every step across that ballroom felt unreal. People stared, then looked away the second Nathan noticed. A woman in diamonds pressed her lips together and whispered to her husband. A waiter froze with a tray of appetizers in both hands. The manager, who had once scolded me for taking a 10-minute break after a double shift, lowered his eyes as we passed. That frightened me more than the men on the terrace. I knew what fear looked like when it wore a cheap jacket. I had never seen it dressed in silk. At the service hallway, the taller of the two men moved into our path. He smiled at me as if we were old friends. "Miss Carter forgot something in the staff area," he said. Nathan stopped. The hallway lights hummed above us. Somewhere behind a closed kitchen door, plates clattered and someone laughed. Ordinary sounds from a life that suddenly seemed miles away. Nathan lifted his hand, the one that no longer wore the ring. The man's smile faded. His eyes dropped to my left hand, to the black stone, to the mark of Nathan Cross sitting loose on my finger. The change was immediate. His shoulders tightened, his chin lowered. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. "My apologies." Then he looked at me, not with threat now, but with something close to alarm. I did not realize. I did not understand until he stepped back and bowed his head. "Forgive me, Mrs. Cross." The words hit harder than the broken glass had. I stared at him, then at Nathan.
No, iwi sparat.
"No, I am not." Nathan did not correct him. He just opened the service door and guided the night to swallow us whole. The service hallway smelled like lemon cleaner, wet wool, and panic. At least, maybe the panic was only mine. The heavy door swung shut behind us, cutting off the music, the chandeliers, the polite world that had watched me be renamed without blinking. Mrs. Cross. The words kept echoing in my head, impossible and humiliating and terrifying all at once. I was not anyone's wife. I was Emily Carter, temporary banquet staff, overdue on rent, owner of one black dress, and 2 pairs of work shoes. I had never even been inside a bridal shop. I had never stood beside Nathan Cross before tonight. I barely knew the sound of his voice, and somehow a stranger with frightened eyes had bowed his head to me like I belonged to the most dangerous man in New York. I stopped walking so fast my shoes skidded on the polished concrete. Nathan turned back. 2 of his men paused near the exit doors, careful not to look directly at us. "Take it back," I said, lifting my hand between us. The ring sat loose on my finger, too large, too cold, a black stone watching me like an eye. Nathan's expression did not change. "Not here." "Yes, here." My voice cracked, but I forced it higher. "Right now. I do not know what this means to your people, but I know what it does not mean to me. I am not your wife." One of his men shifted his weight. The tiny movement made Nathan's eyes cut toward him. The man went still. That was when I understood another terrible thing. Everyone around Nathan Cross was trained to fear silence. Nathan stepped closer, slowly enough that I could have moved away if I wanted to. I did not. My back was already against the wall. "No," he said. "You are not my wife." Relief rushed into me so fast it almost made me dizzy. Then he added, "But they need to believe you are until sunrise." The relief vanished. That is insane. That is survival. Not mine. Yours. Your rules. Your world. Your men whispering things I never agreed to. His jaw tightened, just slightly, the first crack in all that control. My world is the reason those men stepped back. Your world is the reason they came near me in the first place. The words landed between us hard enough to change the air. For a moment, no one breathed. I expected anger. I expected his voice to sharpen, his face to close, his power to rise up and remind me how small I was. Instead, Nathan looked at me like I had struck something deeper than pride. Something old. Something he kept locked behind expensive suits and colder eyes. "You are right," he said quietly. That stopped me more than any threat could have. Outside, tires hissed over rain-soaked pavement. The exit door opened, and cold air swept through the hallway. A black SUV waited beneath the service awning, its windows dark, engine running. One of Nathan's men held the door open. I looked from the car to the ring, then back to Nathan. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere they cannot reach you." "And after sunrise?" His eyes flicked to my hand. "After sunrise, we discussed choices." I almost laughed. It came out more like a breath breaking in half. "Choices? You put your ring on me in front of an entire ballroom. I put protection on you. They called me Mrs. Cross."
His gaze held mine.
"And you are alive to hate me for it." I hated that he was right. I hated the way my fear kept making room for logic. I hated that the hallway behind us no longer felt like a path back to my life, only a place where men with careful smiles might be waiting. Slowly, I reached for the ring and pulled. It slid past my knuckle with a cold scrape. Nathan's men reacted before he did. Not dramatically, not loudly, but every head turned, every shoulder locked. Even the man holding the SUV door looked at my bare finger as if I had just stepped off a ledge. Nathan did not move. His voice dropped. "Emily." I held the ring in my palm. What happens if I stop wearing it? For the first time since he had crossed that ballroom, Nathan Cross looked almost afraid. Not for himself.
For me.
Then a phone rang in the silence. One of his men answered, listened, and went pale. Nathan took the call without looking away from me. I heard only 3 words from the speaker. "They found her." Nathan closed his hand gently around mine, folding my fingers back over the ring.
"That,"
he said, "is what happens." The SUV moved through Manhattan like the city had been warned to get out of its way. Rain streamed across the tinted windows, blurring streetlights into long golden scars, while I sat in the back seat with Nathan Cross beside me and his ring locked inside my fist. I had put it back on before we left the hotel, not because I trusted him, not because I accepted whatever lie the world had decided to place over my life, but because the fear in his men had told me the truth faster than any explanation could. Outside that ring, I was a witness. Inside it, I was untouchable. Or, at least close enough to untouchable that dangerous men hesitated. Nathan did not speak for the first 10 minutes. He watched the city through the glass, one hand resting on his knee, the other holding a phone that kept lighting up with messages he ignored. I stared at my reflection in the window. Pale face, wet hair slipping from its pins, black uniform stained with rain and champagne, a white handkerchief tied around my palm by a man whose name could make a room lower its voice. Nothing about me looked like a wife. Nothing about me looked powerful. And yet, when our SUV stopped at a red light, a man in a dark sedan beside us glanced over, saw the ring on my finger, and immediately looked away. My stomach turned. "Tell me what it means," I said. Nathan's eyes shifted to me. "The ring? The lie?" His jaw tightened. "It is not a lie to them. It is to me." For a second, the only sound was the tires whispering over wet pavement. Then he said, "My family does not use paper for certain promises. We use symbols. A house crest, a seat at a table, a ring." I looked down at the black stone. "So, they think you married me because of jewelry? They think I claimed responsibility for your life. That is not the same thing. In my world, it is close enough to make them careful." The SUV turned off the main road and passed through a pair of iron gates taller than my apartment building. Beyond them rose a mansion of gray stone and sharp windows, set back from the street behind black trees and guarded driveways. It did not look like a home. It looked like a courthouse for sins nobody had confessed. The front door opened before the car stopped. Men in suits stood beneath the awning, their faces unreadable until I stepped out. Then, one by one, their eyes dropped to my hand. The ring changed them, not into friends, not into kind men, into men who understood a rule had entered the room wearing my skin. An older woman in a charcoal dress appeared at the doorway, silver hair pulled into a neat knot. She looked at Nathan first, then at me, and her face softened in a way that made my chest ache unexpectedly. "Miss Carter," Nathan said, "this is Margaret Hale. She has run this house since before I was born." Margaret's eyes rested on the ring. "No," she said quietly. "Tonight, the house will call her Mrs. Cross." Heat rushed to my face. "Please do not." Margaret studied me, not unkindly. "Then forgive us. But until morning, that name may keep you breathing easier." Nathan turned toward the stairs. "Give her the East Room. Fresh clothes. A doctor for her hand." "I do not need a doctor," I said. "You are bleeding. I am also standing." Margaret's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Nathan looked at me for a long second, and something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Then sit before you fall." I hated how close that came to sounding gentle. Inside the mansion, the air smelled like cedar, old books, and rain drying on expensive coats. Portraits lined the hallway, pale faces in dark frames watching me pass. At the end of the hall, I saw one portrait different from the rest. A woman with Nathan's same calm eyes, her hand folded over a black stone ring. My feet slowed. Margaret noticed. Her voice dropped. That was his mother. I looked at the ring on my finger, suddenly colder than before. She wore it. Margaret nodded once. And after she died, he never let anyone touch it. Behind me, Nathan's voice came low and sharp with warning. "Margaret." But it was too late. The rule had changed shape in my mind. This was not protection borrowed for one night. This was grief placed on my hand, and Nathan Cross had not told me how much it weighed. Margaret led me upstairs before Nathan could say anything else, but the portrait followed me long after it disappeared behind the curve of the staircase. His mother had worn the ring. His mother had died wearing the ring. And now that same cold black stone sat on my hand like a secret I had been tricked into carrying. The East Room was larger than my entire apartment. Pale walls, heavy curtains, a fireplace that had already been lit, and windows looking over a garden silvered by rain. Someone had placed folded clothes on the bed, soft gray sweatpants, a white sweater, socks thick enough for winter. I stood in the middle of all that quiet luxury and felt smaller than I had in the ballroom. At least there, I knew my place. I was staff. Invisible. Here, everyone looked at me like I had arrived with a crown I did not know how to wear. Margaret cleaned the cut on my palm with steady hands. The sting made me breathe in sharply, but I did not pull away. She noticed. Of course she did. People in that house seemed trained to notice everything. "You are braver than you think," she said. I looked at the ring. I am more confused than brave. Her expression softened. Those two often feel the same at first. I wanted to ask about Nathan, about his mother, about why the entire house seemed to hold its breath around a piece of jewelry, but I was afraid of the answers. So I asked the safest question. Why does everyone keep calling me that? Margaret wrapped a clean bandage around my palm. Because Mr. Cross allowed them to. Allowed them? In this house, silence is rarely an accident. That stayed with me after she left. I changed out of my uniform with my back to the mirror. Not because anyone was watching, but because I did not want to see myself wearing clothes chosen by strangers, standing in a room paid for by a man I should have feared more cleanly. Fear was easier when it had only one shape. Nathan Cross complicated it.
He had frightened me, yes.
But he had also wrapped my hand before ordering anyone else to move. He had taken me from danger without making me feel touched by it. He had called me alive to hate him, and somehow that had sounded less like arrogance than proof that he understood the cost of what he had done. I opened the bedroom door sometime after midnight. The hallway was dim, lit by small brass lamps along the walls.
I should have stayed inside.
I should have slept. Instead, I followed the pull of that portrait back down the stairs. The woman in the frame looked younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with pale skin, dark blonde hair, and Nathan's same severe calm. Her hand rested over the ring like she was protecting it from the painter himself. I stood there staring until Nathan's voice came from the shadows. Her name was Eleanor. I turned. He stood near the library doors, jacket gone, black shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, his expression unreadable. Without the ballroom around him, without men waiting for his orders, he looked less like a legend and more like a tired man who had forgotten how to be anything else. Margaret said she wore it, I said. His eyes moved to my hand. She did. And after she died, no one else did. The silence that followed answered before he could. Rain tapped against the tall windows behind the staircase. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock marked the hour with a single low chime. Why give it to me? I asked. Do not say protection. Not this time. Nathan looked at his mother's portrait. For the first time, the control in his face did not hold completely. It did not break. Men like him probably learned young not to break, where anyone could see. But something shifted. Something human moved beneath the stone. Because the men who wanted you silent would have walked through any ordinary warning, he said. They would not walk through her ring. So, I am wearing your mother's ghost. His gaze returned to mine, sharp with pain he did not deny. You are wearing the only promise I have never failed to keep. My throat tightened before I could stop it. But you did fail her. The words were too honest, too cruel, and the second they left my mouth, I wished I could pull them back. Nathan did not punish me for them. He only looked at the portrait. Yes, he said quietly. That is why I recognized the look on your face tonight. I whispered. What look? His eyes found mine. The look of someone realizing no one is coming in time. The hallway seemed to narrow around us. I looked down at the ring again, and for the first time, it did not feel like ownership. It felt like an apology, too heavy for one man to say out loud. By morning, the house had learned how to move around me. Doors opened before I reached them. Voices lowered when I passed. Men who looked like they had never apologized to anyone in their lives stepped aside and called me Mrs. Cross with careful mouths, as if the name itself had teeth. I hated it less than I had the night before, and that frightened me more than the name. Margaret brought coffee to the breakfast room at 7, strong and black, with toast I could barely swallow. Outside the windows, the rain had stopped, leaving the garden washed clean and silver under a pale New York sky. Nathan sat at the far end of the table, reading messages on a phone that seemed to make every person near him tense. He wore a charcoal suit now, perfect again, as if midnight confessions and haunted portraits had never happened. But when his eyes lifted to mine, I saw the sleeplessness there. He had not escaped the night either. "You should eat," he said. "You should stop giving orders disguised as concern." Margaret made a small sound into her coffee tray. Nathan looked at me for one long second, then set his phone down. Fair. That single word unsettled me. Men like him were supposed to enjoy obedience. Nathan Cross seemed more interested in whether I would keep my spine. I was still thinking about that when the front doors opened, and the house changed temperature. 3 visitors arrived with coats over their arms and smiles that did not belong in daylight. They were older than Nathan, polished, wealthy, the kind of men who could sit in boardrooms and churches with the same clean hands. Margaret's face closed the moment she saw them. Nathan stood. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. I did not move. His gaze cut to me. "Emily, I heard you. Then listen." But I was tired of men deciding where my feet belonged. The visitors entered the breakfast room as if they owned part of the air. Their eyes went first to Nathan, then to me, then to the ring on my hand. The tallest one smiled. "So, it is true. The Cross House has a new queen." My skin tightened. Nathan's voice stayed calm. "Choose your words carefully, Vincent." The man, Vincent, gave a soft laugh. "I meant no disrespect. I am only surprised. She does not look like your world." The old me would have looked down. The old me would have let the rich man speak around me and hoped he forgot my face. But the ring was heavy, my bandaged palm ached, and something in me had gone quiet in the strongest way. I stepped from behind Nathan before he could stop me. "That is because I am not from his world," I said. The room went still. Vincent's smile thinned. "And yet you wear his ring. For protection. Is that what he told you?" "That is what I chose to believe until I had better information." Nathan's eyes moved to my face, sharp and unreadable. Vincent took one slow step closer, stopping several feet away, polite enough to be safe and cruel enough to be clear. "Men like Nathan do not give protection for free, Miss Carter." "Then maybe men like Nathan are not the only problem." The silence after that was absolute. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. Vincent's expression hardened, but I kept going because fear had already taken enough from me. "I did not ask to be pulled into this. I did not ask for your rules, your titles, or your whispers. But I know what I heard last night. I know someone said my name like I was disposable. So let me be very clear. I may not understand your world, but I understand respect. And I will not beg men like you for permission to breathe." No one moved. Nathan looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time, not as a witness, not as a mistake, not as a woman wrapped in his protection, but as someone standing on her own 2 feet in a room designed to make her kneel. Then he pulled out the chair beside him. The sound of its legs against the floor was soft, but every man heard it. "Sit," Nathan said, not as an order this time, but as an invitation. I looked at the empty chair, then at Vincent, then at the ring on my finger. Slowly, I sat beside Nathan Cross. And for the first time since he put that ring on my hand, the room did not look at me like his burden. It looked at me like his choice. The chair beside Nathan Cross changed everything without moving an inch. Vincent and the other men stayed for 20 minutes, but after I sat down, their voices lost some of their shine. They still spoke in careful phrases about alliances, loyalty, misunderstandings, and the cost of public rumors, but their eyes kept returning to my hand,
To the ring.
to the woman they had expected to frighten into silence. I did not understand half of what they said, and I understood enough to know the other half was meant to hide something worse. Nathan answered them with quiet precision. No raised voice.
No threats.
Just calm words placed like locked doors. When Vincent finally left, he paused at the entrance and looked back at me. "Be careful, Miss Carter," he said. "This house makes promises it cannot always keep." Nathan's face did not change, but the room tightened around him. I expected him to respond with power. Instead, he let the silence hum until Vincent looked away first. Only after the front doors closed did Nathan turn to me. "You should not have challenged him." I lifted my coffee cup with both hands, so he would not see them shake. "You should have warned me that breakfast came with enemies." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth and vanished. "That was not an enemy," My stomach sank. Then what was he? A man waiting to become one. I looked toward the empty doorway. The mansion felt different now, less like a shelter and more like a chessboard where everyone already knew the rules except me. Nathan seemed to read that thought. I can send you away today, he said. The word surprised me so much I forgot to breathe. Away. A safe house in Maine. New name. New phone.
Cash.
No one would know where you went. I stared at him. Then why did you not offer that last night? Because last night, I did not know who inside my circle had already spoken your name. The answer was too honest, and honesty from Nathan always felt more dangerous than mystery. He stood and walked to the window, keeping several feet between us, like distance was another kind of respect. I will not pretend this is simple, Emily. Wearing that ring protected you, but it also made you visible. That is my failure. I waited for him to add that I owed him, that I had no choice, that his world had already decided. He did not. He just turned back with tired eyes and said, "So now the choice has to be yours." The word choice landed softly, but it shook something loose inside me. I thought of the ballroom, the service hallway, the man bowing his head and calling me a name I had not earned. I thought of Margaret wrapping my hand, of Eleanor cross-watching from her portrait, of Nathan looking almost afraid when I tried to remove the ring. Then I thought of my apartment, my uniform in a locker, my phone still sitting at the Whitmore Grand, and the life I had worked so hard to keep ordinary. I need my things, I said. My phone, my purse, my jacket. Nathan nodded once. I will have someone bring them. No, my voice steadied before the rest of me did. I want to go. His eyes sharpened. That is not safe. Nothing is safe anymore. At least let me walk through one door, because I chose it. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Every powerful line in his body seemed built for refusal. But then he reached into his pocket, took out a set of car keys, and placed them on the table between us.
Then I drive, he said.
You sit where you want. Front seat, back seat, or not at all. It was such a small thing. Almost ridiculous, compared to rings and enemies and hidden names. But after a night of being pulled through rooms by fear, that small choice felt like oxygen. An hour later, we rode back into the city in a black sedan instead of the SUV. I sat in the front passenger seat because choosing it mattered. Nathan kept both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. No guards in the car with us. No hand in my back. No claim pressed into my skin except the one I had not removed. At a red light on Lexington Avenue, I slipped the ring off and held it in my palm. Nathan noticed, but he did not stop me. He did not even speak. That was when I began to understand him. His control was not in how tightly he held me. It was in how hard he fought himself not to. I looked at the black stone, then at the city ahead, wet and bright under the morning sun. Slowly, I put the ring back on. Nathan's breath changed, barely, but I heard it. Why? He asked. I kept my eyes forward. Because today, I am not wearing it because I am scared. He said nothing, but his silence felt different now. Warmer. Almost grateful. Then his phone lit up in the cup holder with a message from an unknown number. 5 words filled the screen before he could turn it over. She is coming back here. The message stayed on the screen for 3 seconds, but it was long enough to turn the air in the car cold. She is coming back here. Nathan took the phone, read it once, and his face became still in the way I had learned to fear. Not because he was angry, because every feeling had been locked behind the door where decisions lived. Who sent that? I asked. He checked the number, then the rearview mirror, then the street behind us. Someone who knows where we are going. My fingers curled around the edge of the seat. Only your people knew that. He did not answer, and that silence frightened me more than yes would have. The light changed. The sedan rolled forward. New York moved around us like nothing had shifted, buses breathing smoke, people hurrying through crosswalks, coffee cups in hand, phones against ears, all of them living inside a normal morning I suddenly missed so much it hurt. Nathan turned onto a side street instead of heading straight to the Whitmore Grand. We are not going to the hotel, he said. Not through the front. Nathan. His name came out before I could stop it. It was the first time I had said it without fear wrapped around it. His eyes flicked to me, and something in them softened for half a second. "I know," he said quietly. "You wanted to choose the door. I am trying to make sure there is still a door to choose." We reached the hotel through the employee entrance behind the loading dock, where puddles trembled under. The tires and the smell of wet cardboard filled the narrow alley. Nathan parked beneath a security light that buzzed overhead. "Stay beside me," he said, then paused. "Please." That word did more to move me than any command could have. Inside, the hotel looked different in daylight. Less magical. More tired. The service hallway where I had begged him to take the ring back was empty now, except for a janitor's cart and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. My locker sat at the end of the staff room, still dented near the handle, still marked with a sticker from last Christmas. For 1 second, seeing it made me feel like Emily Carter again. I opened it with shaking hands.
My purse was there. My jacket.
My cheap flats. My phone sat on the shelf, screen cracked, battery nearly dead. I picked it up and saw 27 missed calls from a block number. Then one text from my own phone appeared on Nathan's phone in his hand. "She is here." I stopped breathing. I did not send that. Nathan moved toward me instantly, but the staff room door opened before he reached me. A man in a hotel security jacket stepped in, smiling like he belonged there. I recognized him from the Cross house. One of the men who had lowered his eyes when I passed that morning. "Mr. Cross," he said calmly, "there has been a complication." Nathan placed himself between us. "Who gave the order, Mason?" Mason's smile faded, not from guilt, but from disappointment. "You did, the moment you put that ring on her." He looked past Nathan to me. "Some promises make houses weak." My hand went cold around my phone. Nathan's voice dropped. "Step aside." Mason lifted both hands, empty, peaceful, almost polite. "I am not here to start anything. I am here to deliver a message." The lights went out. Not all at once. One flicker. Then darkness. The emergency lamps glowed red along the floor, turning the room into something unreal. Nathan reached back for me, but someone outside the second door pulled the fire alarm. Sound exploded through the hallway. I flinched, and in that half-second, Mason threw something small across the floor. Smoke, white and thick, filled the room in a soft cloud that stole the walls without touching my skin. Nathan found my wrist. "Emily." I held on, but another hand caught my sleeve from behind the lockers. Not hard enough to hurt, just fast enough to separate. I called his name once before the smoke swallowed him. Then cold air hit my face. A service door. An alley. A car waiting with its engine running. I twisted, kicked, dropped my purse, anything to leave signs behind. My ring slipped loose in the struggle and slid halfway down my finger. I grabbed it before it fell.
No.
Not this. Not Eleanor's ghost. Not Nathan's only promise. So I pressed the black stone into the wet dust on the car door, leaving a dark crescent mark before they guided me inside. The man beside me spoke softly as the car pulled away. "Do not be afraid, Mrs. Cross. We are only taking you where his mother made her final mistake." I looked down at the ring still on my hand, my heart pounding against my ribs. For the first time, I did not wear it to survive Nathan's world. I wore it because somewhere behind me, Nathan Cross would follow the promise he had never forgiven himself for breaking. I counted turns because it was the only power I had left. 3 rights. One long stretch over rough pavement. A left where the tires hissed through standing water. Then silence, the kind that belongs outside the city, where there are no horns, no subway brakes, no strangers laughing under awnings while the world ends for someone else. When the car stopped, I saw the place through rain-streaked glass. A small stone chapel stood beyond a rusted gate, forgotten between bare trees and a cemetery with leaning markers. Its windows were dark. Its front steps were cracked. Somehow, before anyone said a word, I knew this was where Eleanor Cross had become a wound Nathan never learned to close. Mason opened my door and offered his hand like this was a formal invitation instead of betrayal. I did not take it.
I stepped out on my own.
The ring sat cold on my finger, marked with dust from the sign I had left behind, and I prayed Nathan would understand it. Inside the chapel, the air smelled like old wood and rain trapped in stone. A few candles burned near the front, their flames trembling whenever the wind slipped through the broken seams of the door. Vincent waited beside the altar in a dark overcoat, his polished shoes clean despite the mud outside.
That bothered me.
Men like him always found a way to stay clean while other people paid the price. "Mrs. Cross," he said, almost amused. "You are the title better than expected." I kept my voice steady. "It is not yours to give me." His smile faded by an inch.
No.
It was Nathan's mistake. He walked closer, stopping far enough away to seem civilized. His father lost control because of Eleanor. Nathan is making the same choice with you. I looked at the candles, the empty pews, the ring that had outlived a woman, a promise, and a grief too heavy for one house. You think caring makes him weak. I think love makes powerful men predictable. My fear went quiet then. Not gone. Just lower.
Smaller.
Then you do not understand love, I said. Love is not the leash. Fear is. The chapel door opened before Vincent could answer. Cold air swept in, and every candle leaned toward Nathan Cross. He stood in the doorway with rain on his shoulders, his face pale and calm, his eyes fixed on me first. Not Vincent. Not Mason.
Me.
Only when he saw that I was standing did he breathe. Behind him, men filled the doorway and the side aisles, silent, controlled, blocking every exit without a single raised voice. Nathan stepped forward. "Emily." My name sounded different in that place. Like a question. Like an apology. Like a promise asking permission to be kept. Vincent laughed softly. There it is. The weakness. Nathan did not look at him.
No, he said.
There she is. The words hit my chest so hard I almost forgot to stand tall. Mason lowered his eyes. Vincent looked around and finally understood what the room had already accepted. Nathan had not come to bargain with fear. He had come to end its authority over both of us. No one shouted. No one needed to. A few quiet words from Nathan, and the men who had brought me there stepped back as if the floor beneath them had changed sides. Vincent's confidence drained slowly, elegantly, like a glass tipped over by an invisible hand. When it was over, Nathan walked to me and stopped, with several feet still between us. He did not reach for me. He did not claim me in front of him. He removed nothing from my hand. Instead, he took off his coat, folded it over one arm, and placed the ring box from his pocket onto the nearest pew. It was empty, waiting. "This ends now," he said quietly. "The name, the protection,
the lie.
All of it. You walk out of here free, Emily." My throat tightened. "And the ring." His eyes lowered to it, then returned to mine. "This time you choose." The chapel seemed to hold its breath. I thought of the ballroom where I had been invisible, the hallway where I had been renamed, the mansion where grief watched from a portrait, the car where I had put the ring back on because fear was no longer the only voice inside me. Slowly, I slipped it off. Nathan's face changed before he could hide it, but he stayed still. I placed the ring in the box. Then I closed the lid, picked it up, and held it against my chest. "I am not wearing it because your world said I was your wife," I whispered. "I am keeping it until you learn how to ask me as a man, not protect me as a king." For the first time since I met him, Nathan Cross smiled like it hurt and healed at the same time. Outside, the rain stopped. And when we walked out together, no one called me Mrs. Cross.
Not that day.
Not until months later, when he stood in sunlight instead of shadow, held out that same ring with shaking hands, and gave me the one thing his world never had. A choice. He gave me his ring to save my life, but I wore it again because he finally understood that love does not own what it protects.